Now the next step is, I think, getting over like bumps
Yes.
and ledges.
Yeah.
Because I have a couple of little like ledges in my house that are maybe like a half-inch tall, and they're very nicely sloped.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically wiped out every time.
Butterscotch
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 183 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I do things only over HTTPS.
I'm Sam, and I'm a Santa Claus, maybe.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today is Christmas Eve 2018. Before we get started, we have a warning. Anything could happen on this show. There's going to be profanity. Because it is Christmas Eve, so it's time to whip up a frenzy of curses. So if you're
as is tradition.
So if you're a child,
I think it's Cursemas Eve.
Christmas.
Ooh, yeah.
At least where I fucking come from.
Yeah. Christmas Eve and Christmas.
Welcome to Christmas Eve, everybody.
Because this also reminds me back
that
when we
should
used
be
to
what
play.
Halloween is called, Christmas.
That's
Ooh,
true.
yeah.
They're just both Christmas. Christmas is just split across 2 days, a few months apart.
It's too powerful. You had to separate it. Separate it by a month.
You can only, and your curses last. Actually, no, this is when your curses get relieved. So curses begin on Halloween, on the first day of Christmas.
Oh.
On the second day of Christmas, which is months later, the curses are lifted. And so that's why we're so fucking celebratory.
That's why October is always so crazy.
Such a shit
It's
piece.
so bad.
Yeah, it's all
That's like that song when they're like, on the first day of Christmas, I got cursed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I
that's what
was in agony.
Yeah. But it's only the 12th day of Christmas, which I believe is the actual Christmas day. I'm not really sure how that works in the song.
I think so.
But that's the day that your 12 curses were lifted.
Mm-hmm.
Has anybody sort of parsed what the fuck they're talking about in this song? Why are there 12 days of Christmas all of a sudden?
It's very unclear.
Because
that means they're starting on the 13th.
But I think it's one of those things where
Unless they start on the 25th and they just keep going.
And they just keep going?
into the new year.
I mean, think about like how Black Friday works now, right? Where it's like it just started one day, and now there's like Cyber Monday.
That's true.
And then
Christmas
there's like a
does
week deal
start
ahead of time.
after Thanksgiving.
I think what happens is actually
There's
you
holiday
give
creep.
if you give someone a holiday, they just start slowly expanding it.
So I guess what we imagine is when that song was written was the snapshot when there were only 12 days of Christmas, because now there are, I don't even know how many.
It's like 35 days,
Something like
basically.
that.
You
As
know,
soon as
this is the thing nobody's talking about. You know, people are always like, oh, sea levels are going to be like a meter higher in 100 years.
Uh-huh.
And nobody's talking about holiday creep. Like,
That's
when are we
true.
going to get work done in 100 years?
Yeah.
New York City is going to be just flooded with
under
presents.
Because Cursemas moves by 2 inches every year,
Uh-huh.
you know, into the surrounding days. So does Easter.
Mhm.
So does...
Think about the polar bears.
Yeah.
You know, what are they going to do?
When is New Year's Day going to become New Year's week? And then all of a sudden, what the fuck are we going to do about that?
Yeah.
We're just going to be partying all the time.
Cool.
Cool.
We're not going to have anything else to do because of all of the, you know, robots driving us around, robots making us coffee, robots giving us foot massages, all that kind of
All
stuff.
that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I think this all makes sense though, because now the new year is when you make all your resolutions for all the ways you're going to be a better person, which really is all just preparation for, because that means you can increase your own quality and your quality of life up until Christmas day one.
Right.
Well, now you get cursed just a fuck ton of times.
Or
right?
Christmas.
Because you want to keep your level of how horrible things are. Like you just want to keep that as low as
So in
possible.
other words, you got to build up for like
so you
8,
build
10
up,
months.
right? And then you get knocked down by day one of Christmas, and then Christmas gets lifted on day 2 of Christmas, and then you start the cycle all over.
I thought you were going to say there's New Year's where you make your resolutions. Then within 2 months, it totally hasn't happened, right? And then by the time you get to Christmas, you're like, fuck, I fucked it all up.
Yeah, that's what it's for. It's for 10 months later when you look up and you're like, I didn't do any of the
Right.
things.
And
I
then-
did.
you're now close enough to the next New Year
Yep.
Right. Because
that
then
you realize suddenly.
Because then between the first day of Christmas and the second day of Christmas, you just be like, shit, fuck, oh, shit. Oh, I fucked it all up.
But then you double down. You double down and make things even worse by eating too much,
Uh-huh.
by not doing anything, by
You go, then
traveling
you
a lot.
Thanksgiving, and then after Thanksgiving, you're like, oh, damn it, shit.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's like a whole continuous end of year, 2-month-long cursing spree.
Yeah. And there's people dealing with like political things at family events, and just
And then everybody gets together bleary-eyed on New Year's Day, and they're like, oh, okay, this time
I'll be better.
This time I'm going to make it.
So Christmas really starts on Halloween and goes all the way through
Until the new year. Well,
Yeah.
then you have to
It's the
Until
2
the
month
New Year's
long
Eve,
realization that you're basically out of time and you haven't really done any of the shit that you planned on.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of curse under your breath.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of this, let's talk about the studio's,
Oh, wait,
2018.
before we do that, we need to mention moneygrab.bscotch.net.
of course.
We've got a bunch of recurring supporters who are helping to keep this podcast, to keep the juice going into the tubes.
I
that
do wish
go.
people could see your face sometimes when you start just explaining what's happening. It's so serious.
So the thing is, we've got these. They're kind of like IV bags
Uh-huh.
of podcast juice that are sort of hanging off the ceiling like bats.
but we have to put quarters in them.
We gotta keep the quarters
in there. So,
And we've got to pay a guy
Yep.
who comes and swaps out the podcast juice bags.
Yep.
And so we've got a bunch of recurring supporters whose money we grabbed over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. And they're helping to keep the juice flowing.
Yeah. So this
So-
Cursemas, give the gift of
More podcasts.
more podcasts.
Yeah. And then we'll do that and then we'll grab your money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
And then we'll curse a lot, sort of, to complete the loop.
It's kind of like a swear jar.
Yeah.
But we're like, we curse and then you give up.
That's true. That's good. Yeah.
That's how those work, right?
I think so.
So, but it's
That's how
like
they should
every
be.
time you
Understanding.
swear,
People give you money.
you get paid.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about 2018.
Year in review.
We can
year
actually
in rear view.
Yeah.
kick off this year in rear view with a question, which these questions come from podcast.bscotch.net. This question comes from 182.
Good name. Good name.
We are now in the last month of 2018. And also for those who haven't heard all of our episodes, early in the year, we announced that 2018 was going to be 20 great teen. And the slogan for the year is quit fucking around.
Mhm.
Yep.
So if there's something that you've been planning on doing, quit fucking around and do it. So a lot of that stuff did happen. And we'll talk about that. So Bam says, how have you guys stopped fucking around? Do you feel like you accomplished more this year than prior years? What do you think about a Discord channel where we can share how we stopped fucking around throughout 2018? Keep up the great work. So maybe we can make a channel that's just called...
Or just do that in the podcast channel.
I think, yeah.
It's
Just
exactly
go-
the right
That's
spot.
true.
Dump your achievements into the podcast.
That's
channel.
at discord.gg/bscotch. I'm just going to be peppering links.
Just link it up.
Yeah.
Verbal links.
It's like when that waiter comes like, you want Parmesan? And you're like, no. And then they're like, I'm going to do it anyway. And they just start throwing cheese on
You're
everything.
like, stop, please.
Yeah.
They
they're
just
like,
keep grinding
"No,
away.
You really want the Parmesan?
Mhm.
You know what I'm talking about.
I know
Oh, yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I think 20 Great Teen actually was very great. And I think a big part of it is the weirdness, because we had actually multiple times when we were having tough conversations about stuff or trying to figure out strategically what we would do. And someone would either say, well, it's 20 Great Teen, which sort of implied
That we're
what we
fucking
needed
around.
to do. Yeah. And so it was like, well, you need to quit fucking around and just do this thing. Or, that things were just going to be great. And I think the framing of it, for some reason, was just super helpful for us in conversation
is.
stuff. When you're like, no, this is 2018. It's not 2017. I mean, that one, is what it is. But
2017, we don't even know what
I
that
don't even know
was.
what happened. Who knows? But 20 Great Teen was already set up to be good on day one. And I think we sort of self-fulfilled that prophecy.
But when you've got this slogan, you can just drop it. You can just drop it into any scenario. And it makes people step back and be like, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're right. We should quit fucking around.
Yeah.
And the important thing was that we made that it was a personal slogan, not a slogan about what was happening in the world around us.
Yes.
Because obviously that was mostly not great.
No.
But it didn't matter because
Because we weren't going to be fucking around.
we were going to not fuck around while the world
We
was.
got our own little sphere of, things to do, of influence.
It's like one of those hamster ball things,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're able to navigate any terrain because we got this weird hamster ball. And it doesn't really matter what's going on around us.
Exactly.
We can go up or down a slight slope
Yeah,
or anything.
A slogan
Or
was just a
anything.
hamster ball. But yeah, I think 2018 was super good. So as far as the recap, I mean, we both started Levelhead, took it to GDC 11 weeks in and pitched it to a bunch of the platforms, and they were all much more excited about it than anything else we've ever made. So that was like, oh, I guess
So we quadrupled down on it.
I guess we have to do this.
But
now.
also, I think the start of Levelhead was also part of the embracing of the quit fucking around
Mhm.
because with Levelhead, we stepped back and we were like, what do we really need to be making right now to make like the biggest impact that we think we can make, both on our studio and on the market?
Mhm.
And so with Scuffle Buddies, which we were working on before, we were just kind of like, I don't really know. This is, like, as we talked about last week, it's just kind of a weird ass thing that just kind of emerged, and then we just rode that wave for 6 months. But Levelhead was very specific and deliberate in its planning. So we started it in over the new year. So like right at the start of January.
We actually targeted a market hole for the first time.
Yeah. We were like, can we make a thing that people A, want, and B, don't already have?
Yes. And we're approaching that now in terms of like the viability of the thing, which is more and more exciting day by day to think about, because I can't tell you after, how many years has it been?
3.
6? Wait, when we just working together.
Since what?
Since we started the studio. 6 years. 2012 is when we started, right? Yeah.
2012.
So after 6 years where we were making stuff that always had a direct competitor, if not like 50, that were already well established, to make something that putting it on these different platforms is not necessarily going to have a direct corollary. It's just, I can't, it just, it's nice.
and that there might even be a chance
relieved.
that we'll have some leverage where platforms we otherwise might not even consider putting it on, because we're just like, they're not going to give a shit about us, and so they won't give us the support that we need, so we won't make any money anyway, so what's the point? Might actually turn around and come right to us and say, hey, we actually want this thing.
Yeah.
Let's make a deal.
And this is the first time that we actually had behind the scenes various YouTubers and streamers and stuff actually coming to us and being like, just so you know, whenever Levelhead's coming out, I want it. I want keys. I want to do this thing. Whereas with Crashlands, we had to beg people to take the keys, the free keys from us.
So I think there's that, which has been just sort of the super exciting undercurrent for the whole year. And on top of that, we've done all sorts of other weird stuff. We randomly decided to do Shenanicon. And
we quit fucking around, because that's been something we've been talking about for a long time. Like, we want to just have something where we can bring our players and podcast listeners and fans and whatever all into the same physical space. We know it's going to cost money. We know we're going to lose money on it. And we don't even know if that many people want to come. But, it is 2018.
Yeah. So let's just do it.
So
see what happens.
Quit fucking around and just do it.
And we did that. And then as far as I think our overall, just general work and stuff, I feel like for me personally on the art side, I've definitely grown a lot this year in terms of both the quality of the work, but then also just the approach. So it's been a very good year.
Yep.
Plus we're on Switch
Sam's
now.
art has just gone fucking ballistic. It's taking classes. We got some good stuff coming in Levelhead. I will say what players will probably be seeing, because we don't know anything for certain yet, because we're still in sketch phase. But what players will be seeing
we didn't used to have a sketch phase.
We have one of those. Which is
there were
insane.
no phases before.
There was just you didn't have art, and now you do, and that's what's in the game.
And that's actually been a huge improvement to our overall pipeline, because now we can iterate on stuff before it's done instead of not iterating on stuff after it's done. So one of the things our players will get to see is the first fully realized planned scene in the Butterscotch art style that is rendered with perspective and everything.
It's gonna be cool.
Because that's always been, of course, contracted out to box art and stuff like that. And that wasn't made in Inkscape, and so all that stuff. So we've got some cool stuff coming that is going to be.
I think it's going to look real good.
It's going to look real good.
Yep.
Let's see. We also got an office this year. Which was another part of our quit fucking around. Like, hey, we're an actual business. We can afford an office. Let's stop working out of a basement like a bunch of weirdos.
Yep.
It definitely changed things too.
It changed everything.
Better. Yeah. It's very good.
Yep.
10 out of 10 if you're in St. Louis, would recommend the Cortex District, the CET in particular, or CIC, any of their buildings. We're also in Boston and a few other places.
Yeah.
Just say.
And Amsterdam.
Amsterdam too. Cool.
Yeah. So this was part of that, learning how to better think about our time and think about. There's that saying, like, if there's something that only you can do, then you should try to do as much of that thing as possible and as little of everything else as possible, because that's where you're really adding value to the people around you. And so, of course, when we're working out of the basement, I'm like vacuuming, we're like taking out trash, I'm washing dishes,
filling up coffee,
swapping out coffee, making grocery runs to keep things stocked up. And it's just like, why am I doing all this stuff? I should be programming. Which isn't to say that stuff isn't valuable. It is valuable, which is why we had to do it.
Yes.
But also, a lot of people can do it, and I'm the
that wasn't your value.
That's not my job, I
think the other really nice thing was we hired out the PR for the Switch launch of Crashlands and also now for Levelhead. So we got to sort of step back and have someone else do that, which is what I used to do. And there's the same question, which is like, there are other people who are much better at this than I am, and I need to be making art or designing.
Because that's
literally
because that's your
Those
thing.
are my things.
Yeah.
So let's quit doing this. And then they did a phenomenal job, even with Crashlands, which is 3 years old and, you know, was ported to the Switch, like far into that market, like already being a thing. So, so yeah, that was really good. I think we're just sort of slowly figuring out how to think about our time a little bit better, and making moves with the studio structurally to better support us as a game making team, which has been really good.
We also got brain globes.
We got brain globes.
And we switched to Trello.
We got
So we took a step back, quit fucking around with our processes. Instead of just having things happen ad hoc and randomly, we now have much better processes for everything that we're doing.
Yep.
We work asynchronously more, so we try to interrupt each other less, you know, all that stuff.
And I started to use Git in a professional manner instead of like the way that
we were
using it. So that's
all
that's
good. These
nice.
are all, we're just,
Oh yeah, we won. We got third place in that
global hack.
We won like $10,000 on a weekend.
I do feel like we were kind of fucking around at that though, because we just kind of wandered in there.
We weren't fucking around. We just were clueless. But I think
We were
there's a big
clueless. That's
difference
true. That's
between
true.
us.
There's a difference.
Yeah, we worked very hard at it.
Yeah.
I read a quote the other day, which was, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. And that sort of sums up, I feel like, how our studio
if it's
operates.
worth doing, it's worth doing.
Well, because
bad.
the other quote is like, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing greatly or good, properly, or whatever the fuck the word is. And like, I think that's the actual quote. And then someone flipped it because they were like, quit having this perfectionist attitude about everything. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing badly.
Because there's this, I guess there's this idea that if it's worth doing, then it's important.
Yeah.
If it's important, then you have to do a really fucking good job. And when you first get started at anything, you're always doing a bad job, which is very discouraging. And then you feel like, well, I'm not actually doing the thing, so I guess I'm not actually doing anything worthwhile.
Yeah.
But really, you just got to do it.
If it's worth doing, it's worth doing badly.
So if it's worth doing, it's worth doing badly or well.
Not punchy enough. Yeah, it's just worth doing.
So
if something's worth doing, it's worth doing.
So it's just if something's worth doing, then just do it.
Yeah,
I guess you just got to get in there.
You just got to get in there.
Yeah. Just got to get in there and do it. Okay, well, I think we need to figure out next year.
Yeah, this is true. 20 Great Teen as a slogan was very instrumental.
And it even named the main character of Levelhead.
It did.
Yeah.
It was called Great Teen.
Great Teen.
Yeah.
So the first question is, what do we want to sort of have the next year be about?
What's the ethos of the year?
I think next year's all about capitalizing on the greatness of this year. You know, we got Levelhead. It's real close to done.
Yeah.
We've got better business and tech practices. We're going to be investing even more in those, like especially at the beginning of the year.
I feel like
it's all about doubling down.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of know. We kind of know what we need to do. I feel like early last year it was like, what are we doing? And I feel like now we know. It's like, at least for the
we've lined up
3 to 6
all of
months.
the dominoes. Now it's time to hit them with a bowling ball.
Right. Maybe 20 bowling ball team.
Yeah.
That doesn't quite
knock the pins down.
Yep.
All right. So we got some options here. One is, of course, 20 crime teen. Just give up on the straight edge, straight and narrow.
Yep. This is what if Levelhead launches, nobody buys it. You know,
20 crime teen. Get onto the dark side.
We're gonna start hacking everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're going to hack the whole internet.
Just
hack the whole internet, take all the money, all of the bitcoins.
I got one of those Alexas and be like, Alexa, hack the mainframe. And she'd be like, okay.
And she's like, nobody's ever asked me for that.
Yeah. I'm just going to do it.
I've had this capability the whole time and nobody thought about it. So we could do 20 crime teen, go to the dark side. Yep. That's that one.
I think that's just what the year will turn into if Levelhead fails.
Yeah. Yep. We could also do 20 swine teen, which is eat trash and get dirty.
Yeah.
So if you're
which more defines like the first couple years of our studio, I think.
Yeah.
That's about
so
right.
That's just you're just going to be down in Red Bulls. You're going to be covered in Cheeto dust.
Yep.
You're going to be.
But you're in there at least.
You're going to be doing stuff, but you're really just not going to be feeling so hot by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think if you're in year one of your own little business project, or that's probably actually appropriate for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because certainly that was what our life was.
Because if it's worth doing, it's worth doing.
If it's worth doing, it's worth doing covered in Cheeto dust.
You
know? And then what you do is maybe after 2 or 3 months, you get one of those cans of air and you just kind of like half-acidly kind of like blow onto your keyboard and get some of the dust off of there. But really, there's stuff under there.
Oh, yeah.
You can see it.
Adam saw the mouse that I've been using, I think, since like we started the studio.
Oh yeah,
it's like it's super fucked up. So like the cord is like it's got right angles in it. I don't even know. I don't know how that works.
But the whole mouse is just like covered in
it's got like a
pale film.
It's just hand film that is slowly built up. And
it was so funny because I looked at it. Because I came over to like use his computer. And I was like, I'm not touching that.
And I was like, fucking gross.
And then Sam looked at it like for the first time.
Yeah, I was like, oh my god.
He's like,
because he hadn't even seen it.
It was like waking up on Cursemas, and realizing you haven't done anything for 10 months. It's horrible.
I will say, for some reason, I've never had that happen to any of the mice that I use.
How do you keep your hands so clean?
I do wash my hands a lot, probably too much. They're very dry.
You just gotta lotion them. Just follow.
Maybe it's a lotion.
It's probably lotion, actually. Yeah.
Oh fuck yeah!
It's lotion.
Because I always lotion them after I wash my hands.
There you go. There's your problem. You need dry, cracked, bleeding hands.
Perfect.
Keep your mice clean.
Well, they should be cracked, but not to the point of bleeding because you get blood on your mouth.
Well, no, it's usually the only bleed on the top. So
that's fine. Yeah, okay,
it's fine.
It's whenever you click the distance.
You click and your
blood
knuckles
spurts.
split. Yeah. But the thing about the blood spurts is it shoots kind of out forward ahead out of the way.
It actually slickens the table.
Slickens the surface. The bottom of the mouse is, of course, a biohazard situation. But the top,
if you're playing Fortnite,
covered.
It gives you a tremendous edge.
Yeah.
You just...
It also gives you the bloodlust because there's already blood just
slickened by the blood of your own self.
Yeah. So the
can we use enslickened?
Enslickened. So the DPI stands for droplets per inch, which is just how much blood you've got the mouse can handle.
Yeah, that's true. You gotta get. Yep.
Yes. Speaking of FPSs,
that's hardcore gaming.
We did play Deep Rock Galactic.
Oh shit! Yeah, we did.
So Friday was our holiday party.
Yeah.
Which in Butterscotch just meant that
it meant we worked from 8 to 2:30,
and then we
drank a bunch of beers and played Deep Rock Galactic
until like 8 p.m.
Deep Rock Galactic is a dwarven space simulator.
Yeah.
Space mining operation.
It's basically somebody said, like, what if you took the dwarves from Lord of the Rings, which are all about mining and fighting things,
and then put them in space as asteroid miners or whatever.
They've got technology and there's aliens. It felt like Starship Troopers / Terraria.
Yeah.
/ Minecraft / Lord of the Rings.
And Left 4 Dead.
/ Left 4 Dead.
Very fun. Would recommend it if anybody's got at least
still in early access, but
buddies.
But the only thing that felt early access was the UIs.
Just the first UI.
Just the first UI.
The main menu UI, they were just like, here's a bunch of buttons. Fuck you. That's sort of what I felt like was the design aesthetic.
Yep. I think that's walking in
there. I wish they would have just wrote that on the screen. Because I feel like that would have been more honest. You know? Like, don't pretend like this is.
Well, that's the thing is you can't actually tell if something is badly designed or just left to be designed later. You know? And if there's no indicator of that.
I'm assuming that I hope that it's left to be designed later.
What they need is for early access games, you need a little sticker, like a little pink sticker or something. You can just like put on the corner of things where you're like, yeah, I'll get to this later. This is like my will do later thing.
Just like a little poop emoji.
Yep.
You just put on.
You'd be like, we know this is shit.
Yeah. I remember seeing one time, I can't remember what game it was, but there was like a big expansion pack or some big thing came out and somebody found just like this big fucking pink cube somewhere, and when you mouse over it, there's a tooltip that's just like, Alan, delete this later. There's a bunch of people posting like, Alan, come on, man, do your fucking job.
It's very funny. All right, where were we? I don't know what we were talking about.
Oh yeah, we're talking about what next year is called.
Yeah,
so we've covered 20 Crime Teen, 20 Swine Teen. This year was 20 Great Teen, so maybe next year's gonna be 20 Fine Teen.
It's just fine.
It's maybe, we already kind of did it now.
We got the great parts out of the way.
Yeah, and so there's not much left now. So it's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that's one of those ones that's not particularly, aspirational.
It's not very,
No, I'm not. I'm not great.
What about 20 Mine Teen? Keep digging.
Keep digging.
Or it's just mine.
Or
it's mine.
Yeah, or not for you. This one's
this one's not for you.
20 Mine Teen. This is all about me now. I'm gonna take what's mine. I'm gonna.
Sounds like maybe that would prompt some very bad behaviors overall. That's gonna rapidly go into 20 Swine Teen if you're not careful. The Mine Teen evolves into a Swine Teen.
It's true.
Like a Pokemon.
What about 20 shrine teen? Put up some candles.
Put up some
worship
candles.
the gods.
Worship
Because
whichever
2018 was so
Whatever you
good.
want. Yeah.
god or gods or whatever else you got going
Ancestors.
Dark, celestial beings. I don't know
Yeah,
what you're
just
into.
whatever you feel like.
on. Yeah, but there's always candles.
You know what,
I
if
feel like
there's-
we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
There's always candles.
There's a supernatural entity that listens to you.
Yeah, I think it's just how you arrange them. So if it's a pentagon, it's for
There you go.
Satan, I guess. And then like
No, it's a pentagram.
pentagram.
Pentagon is I think a
But
pentagon,
a pentagon is just the outside of a pentagram.
That's for the intelligence services.
yeah, that's when you're worshiping, the CIA and shit. Yeah.
But if you
That's how you
But if you
summon an
arrange
agent.
candles in a pentagon, that's also how you arrange candles for a pentagram.
Yeah, you just draw the lines between them differently.
Yeah.
The lines are real important, though.
Yeah.
I was purely talking about where the candles go, though.
Mhm.
So I'm pretty sure I was right on that one.
Yep. You got it. So we can do 20 shrine teen.
Uh-huh.
What about 20
teen.
blind teen?
20 blind teen.
Which is just
Look away.
Take care.
Look away. Don't,
Just look away.
Don't
This
even.
is going to be
It's gonna be
rough.
yeah.
20 blind teen. Don't look at it.
Mm-hmm. Don't even,
Yep.
not even once.
Whatever's about to happen, you don't want to see it.
Mhm.
20 lime teen. Don't get scurvy.
Don't get scurvy.
Maybe
keep
ride
that
one of
vitamin
those.
C up.
Ride one of
Go
those
with
lime
lime bikes.
scooters.
Yeah.
Use those.
20 lime teen scooting toward greatness.
Yep. Just
This year has been brought to you by that scooter company.
That scooter company.
I don't even know what they're called.
Probably lime.
Probably lime.
We can do 20 grind teen, getting shit done.
That's a good one.
Get on the grind.
That's what it's about.
It's about
Nose to the stone.
put your nose on the that's real dangerous.
That's
You wanna
That's
keep-
how you get a sharp nose, though.
20 grind teen,
Mhm.
keep a proper distance from the grindstone and use protective eyewear.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's what this year's
Grind
all about.
safely. It's a marathon.
Grind, but safely. So those are some of our options.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's recap. We got 20 grind teen, 20 shrine teen, 20 fine teen, 20 swine teen, 20 crime teen, 20
Blind teen.
blind teen,
20 lime teen.
20 lime teen.
Mm-hmm.
So
Go ahead and go. If you have one that's striking your fancy, go to the podcast channel. Or if you have a new one, you throw it in there. I'm partial to 20 grind teen because I feel like, it's
Well, I
just
think
about getting shit done.
it also captures nicely the life cycle of a game, right? Which is
the first
beginning
part
is
you
all
quit
great.
fucking around.
Yeah,
and
well,
it's
it's
pretty
quick
great.
around, but it's great because it's just you making cool stuff and whatever.
Mhm.
And then the hardest part, the last phase, is the grind.
Yep.
Where you just have to get it done, and nothing is fun anymore.
Yep.
And you're somehow always 6 weeks away from launch,
Yeah,
but there's always more things adding to your to-do
Yep.
list.
yeah. Because I think I have a feeling that next year is going to be something of a grind. So I think it's
Okay.
probably appropriate,
20 grind teen. All right, so we're feeling 20 grind
Well, you're
teen.
saying in like a positive grind sort of sense.
just
right?
in the way that it has to be.
Not like a World of Warcraft can't collect enough boar meats.
No, actually, I think they're very
situation.
similar. It's just that at the end of our tunnel, instead of just leveling up once, we get to launch a game.
and there's fewer dead pig carcasses. Just
true.
like,
Well, it depends on how
littering
many,
the
it depends on
landscape.
how many pigs we eat during that year.
Yeah,
So I don't know. It could be a lot.
it could be a lot. We don't know. Yeah, so go to discord.gg/bscotch, get in the podcast channel.
Mhm.
We got to figure this out. What is
Very
next year going to be called? Give us your
Opinions.
money, 2 cents.
Gives you money.
All right. And there's one last thing that I think we need to cover,
Very important.
which is I got a Swagtron yesterday.
This is a real device.
It's a real thing.
What would you guess
This is a Christmas gift from our mother.
What would you guess a Swagtron does if you didn't know what it was?
I would guess it's a robot that does your personal shopping.
I would think it's like a cool looking robot jacket that you can wear.
A robot jacket? Like, what is it?
It's like an exoskeleton that,
Yeah.
What it does is when you walk, it just sort of improves how fucking awesome you look with your posture and your swagger.
I wish they called exoskeletons jackets because it'd make mech fights really funny.
Call them
You
swag jackets.
Put on your jacket.
Put on your
You
jacket.
have a jacket fight.
Yep.
Mhm.
So the Swagtron is a smart board. It's one of
Is
those.
that what they call it? A smart board?
Yeah, it's like some people call them a hoverboard, but it's
Yeah.
like the 2-wheeled. It's basically a Segway.
It's the thing that you see in fail videos that people stand on and then fall on their ass.
Yep.
Yes,
Every single time.
Yeah, so it's got the 2 wheels. You stand on it. The 2 wheels it goes horizontal. It's not like front and back.
It's not
like
a
scooter
skateboard.
or a skateboard. And so then it uses gyroscopes
Mhm.
to to determine the angle of each of your feet, and it rotates on a hinge in the middle. So then, based on how you're leaning your feet and stuff, then it moves forward and back. Mm-hmm. That's all there is to it. It's there's no like buttons or fancy controls. You just kind of lean it around. So we all three tried it. It was interesting.
It was crazy because the exact same formula followed for everyone, which is that first you stand on it and then you just fall down.
You stand and you start to panic because while you're trying to get on it, you're not stable the first time. And so
if it detects a change in angle, then it applies just a shitload of actual like torque to whatever that foot is that you had on there. So if you got your right foot on it and you sort of lean it back a little bit, then the board suddenly is like, it just flies back.
Because basically the angle of the board is anticipating that there's a person on the board who is leaning in that angle, which means that if you are at like a 10-degree lean, that's a fucking steep lean, which means it has to go really fast to keep you upright. Right? Because basically if you're leaning, you're actually just perpetually falling and the board is now
trying to catch
keeping you up.
Yeah.
So when you're getting on the thing, when you first do it, your body doesn't know how to keep it stable. So your ankles will kind of like rotate around and the board just starts like whipping around like a weird snake thing.
So you got to fall off once pretty horribly. And then you step on it and then just sort of step off of it the second time when it starts wobbling like crazy, or fall off slightly more gracefully.
Right.
Usually there's a few more falls in there, maybe like 5. And then at some point you put your foot on it.
But the falls become a little bit more controlled and they happen a little bit later.
Yeah. And then you put your foot on it and then it just stands still for the first time, as opposed to trying to like veer off in a direction, which is odd. And then you just
so then you're able to just completely stand still on it without making it whip around like a bucking bronco.
Yeah. So you get your other foot on there, and now usually what happens is there's an intense wobbling phase just for a moment, like a second or two, where you are sort of integrating your brain with the board, and then suddenly you're just standing there. And then you can lean, and then you'll start leaning very slowly. And just the
going
best part,
like 1 inch an hour.
Yeah, we were doing this in a driveway. And so, Seth was the first one who was doing on his board, and he's like so excited, and he's just sort of like, he's going maybe like, I had like a foot.
Like 1/10 walking speed.
Yeah, basically. Like it was hysterical because it was so damn slow, but he was just like giddy. He's like, look. He's like,
and of course my arms are completely stiff because I don't want to fuck it up.
Yep.
And I'm just like,
and then you just sort of start leaning into it and figuring it out. But the weirdest thing to me was just watching everybody do it, because it was the same steps. It took almost the same amount of time. And it's just kind of creepy to think about, because your brain you're sort of experiencing this weird thing for the first time. And it takes like 2 minutes before you can just stand on it and just sort of like be moving around.
And you're not doing it consciously. Your brain's just doing it.
It's horrifying. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, watching several people do it for the first time and just seeing the exact sequence of steps in the same amount of time in the same order. Really the only distinction then is whether or not the person decides to get back on it or how quickly they want to get back on it. But once they do that, then everything just happens at the same speed as it always does. So that's kind of,
maybe that's a metaphor for life. Metaphor? It doesn't matter. We talked about this yesterday. It doesn't matter how many times you fall off the Swagtron.
Just what matters is you get back on one more time than that.
Yep. Because it'll be better every time.
Yeah. And I was honestly
maybe it's
terrified.
20 Swagtron teen.
20 Swagtron teen.
Keep getting back on.
Get back on the Swagtron.
20 Tron teen.
But yeah, so then what happened was for me, so I rode it around the longest, and I was able to kind of pick up some speed and start to navigate more. And then I took it home, and I was just like I'm just going to be on this thing for as long as I can, and just to kind of like bake in the mental model, And so I just kind of like roamed around the house with it for like 20 minutes, just kind of going down the hallways and turning around. And then at a certain point I was like, I'm going to feed my dog on the Swagtron. So I go to, I Swagtron over to the closet, and I open the closet, and then I crouch down on it.
Whoa.
And I'm like, oh shit, I forgot the food bowl. So I stand back up, and then I close the door, Swagtron over, bend down, grab the food bowl way off the ground, and go back, fill it up. And I was able to do it. So
nice.
I was And then I took it downstairs where I've got a little bit more space.
You rode it down the stairs.
I brought it downstairs.
Now you have to build a ramp into your stairs.
I need a ramp.
Yeah.
Well, I need a fireman's pole.
Well, you
would
can't
have-
Swagtron down a fireman's pole.
I know, but that's just a separate thought.
Okay. Fair point.
Maybe you can't, but it's just,
Yeah.
it's just an advanced thing.
It's an advanced move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so then I started trying to go as fast as I could with it. But of course I didn't have that much space to really go. But yeah, I could feel the change where at the beginning I would start going fast, and then I would hit like a panic point, and then I would start like whipping my legs around like a weirdo. And then of course that would sabotage my movements. And then eventually I hit a point where I could just like go super fast for a brief moment and then just like come to a stop, just via like really subtle leaning, you know? And so it really just comes down to, no matter what you're doing, to just not panic about it and don't think too hard about it, and just let it,
Just do less.
just do it, do less, you know? So that's fun.
It's very cool.
My calves are very sore though. It's a weird motion. I don't think you're.
Yeah.
used
Well, it's also
to.
interesting because it's basically just you taking the floor with you everywhere you go. You know, because you don't take your, instead of just stepping up and down on a floor and moving around on a floor, you're just like, this is my floor now.
Yeah.
And you just stand on it and you take it with you.
I will say, after an hour of swagtroning, walking felt very weird and very inefficient. Like at a certain point, I was like, okay, now I need to practice. I need to practice being cool on the Swagtron. So I get out my phone and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just checking. I'm just reading text messages. And I'm kind of like slowly meandering around the house, looking through my phone, you know, and I don't have to do anything. I'm just like barely leaning and I'm traveling around like a ghost. It's pretty fucking awesome.
That's neat.
Yeah. Now the next step is, I think, getting over like bumps
Yes.
and ledges.
Yeah.
Because I have a couple of little like ledges in my house that are maybe like a half-inch tall, and they're very nicely sloped. And I basically wiped out every time I got So, you know, whatever. All right, let's get on to some other questions. Again, these questions come from podcast.bscotch.net. Next question comes from RetroBananaManNL. Where do you get your industry news information from? Preferably be more specific than the internet.
Gamesindustry.biz. Yep, that's it.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, if you want the news, you go there. If you want whatever else you would call it, go to Gama Sutra. Because anybody can write anything on Gama Sutra. Well, that's also true of everything, I guess, everywhere.
What do you mean?
Like anybody can write anything on gamesindustry.biz too.
If they were good enough to get their article published.
Right. But that doesn't mean you
quite
could,
the same,
right? But like that doesn't mean you could still trust it. In any scenario, you should still be asking questions about it.
Well, I think there's a distinction though between some rando writing it and anybody.
And journalism, probably.
No, but I mean, like, everybody's a rando. You know what I mean?
Deep down, we're all randos.
Deep down, we're all rando to somebody.
Yeah.
Right. And so no matter where you're reading your sources, it's just some randos writing it. But it's not just any randos necessarily.
Well, you build trust in the institution that the randos built.
Yeah. And then at some point, they're not randos anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
At
the
some
games
point-
industry randos, I trust them.
Yeah. There are fewer of them.
Yeah. So at Gama Sutra, though, people can just write blog posts. And then if they somehow pass some kind of a test
Quality
or
bar,
something, then they'll get moved over to the front page of Gama Sutra. So you get a lot.
It's
You get
not
a
a
lot
test for truth.
no, it's just a test for like, does this seem fine or something? Is it seemingly well composed and whatnot? So you'll get a lot of postmortems and stuff written by people who, you know, put a game through early access, or like, oh, here's our we did everything right and it totally didn't work article for our game.
A lot of those.
A lot of those.
Inside of which are many things that did not do right.
Yep.
Yeah. So you'll see, you know, somebody being like,
You gotta take all those with a grain of salt.
yeah, because
Actually, like pounds of so much
Just
salt
like-
that it just kills you.
Yep, just an ocean worth.
yeah. I think the reason there is that people get too close to their own projects, and
I don't think it's even that. I think it's just that it's very hard to reason about anything.
Yeah.
And people have not been equipped with how to think about things statistically or from just like a historical standpoint or any of those kinds of things. And so people are trying to evaluate stuff that they just have too limited information and and practice evaluating that kind of thing.
So
'Cause,
publishing games is like notoriously complex.
it is like if the only time you evaluate like the success of a game in a market is when you yourself have launched a game and you're trying to understand like why it went the way it did. Like how the fuck
You got a sample of one every like 2 years.
it's the only time you thought about it, right? Yeah. Or it's one of the few times you thought about it when you read other, Gamma Sutra articles. If you're the kind of person who like spends all your time reading about other people's work and trying to figure out how they did things and doing statistical analyses and trying to understand the broader market and all this kind of stuff, then yeah, maybe you could have a fairly sound, argument about what happened.
But even then,
probably not.
who knows?
Yeah, because oftentimes in those "we did everything right and nothing worked" articles, usually what people talk about is what they did on the promotion side.
Yes.
They say, I found a list of things that I'm supposed to do for promoting my game. I sent out keys to YouTubers. I sent out keys to journalists. I reached out to Twitch streamers. I did everything right.
But then you look at the game.
You look at the game and you're like, no, you didn't though.
You
Because
promoted it properly, but that's about it.
I don't think people want this thing you made.
But yeah, so those are the two places we go mainly. And then every so often I'll check in on Touch Arcade for mobile stuff, PC Gamer, and Rock Paper Shotgun, and then Polygon, just kind of generally.
What about Kotaku? What do they have? I feel like they have stuff.
Kotaku has good pieces.
Yeah, they have really good pieces.
They have
but
a lot of.
It's not so much like newsy news.
It's also not so much just games.
Yeah.
They have a much broader segment of the nerd market.
Yes. The nerd market.
Yeah. Which is actually kind of fun too, though, because then if you just also want to get news about like
Nerds.
about board games
What do these
and
nerds
movies
do?
that you're gonna like, and that kind of stuff. It's a good source for that. Yeah, for me, it's basically just gamesindustry.biz, which is also because of this fact that I very explicitly mentioned earlier, which is that you actually can't trust anybody's evaluation of anything. And so the nice thing about gamesindustry.biz is that for the most part, they don't evaluate stuff. They just tell you things that happened. Right?
It's more like reporting.
It's reporting, and it's just reporting on major events that happen in the industry. And it's a UK website, and so there's definitely some kind of UK focus on it. But so much of games is global anyway that it doesn't really matter. Yeah. And so I find it a really useful way just to know like what's happening with the big players, what's happening with the companies involved, what's happening with the major publishers and the people who run the platform.
And there's just not that many articles on it, which is actually really nice.
It's only maybe like 10 a day, if even that. Yeah,
I think it's that.
Yeah, most 4 or 5. Most major sites, I think what they go for is ad money.
Yeah.
And so they want to write about as many things as possible, just in the event that any one of them is of interest to anybody.
Well, I think the important note here again is that you don't need to read it every day. In fact, you probably should.
Not just check in a couple times a week.
Yeah,
I just put it on Feedly, and I check my Feedly when I'm on breaks.
Yeah, you do that too. I sort of reduce mine to just like trying to read it once a week because you can read the whole thing in 30 minutes, like reading a paper.
Yeah, I mostly just read the headlines anyway because the headlines are sufficient just to be like, what happened today?
Yep.
They'd be like, this happened today, and you're like, all right, I guess that happened.
Cool.
And then when you open the article, they'll be like, let me tell you how this happened. And you're like, well, it's fine.
Yeah,
it happened. So
that's fine.
Whatever happened. All right, next question comes from Dageki. How do you do version control on your code? When you do code, do you follow any particular style, agile, etc.? So this is a technical question that we need to answer non-technically.
I will say I'll give a Google term you can go after, which is I think it's called Git Flow.
The Git Flow workflow.
Something like that, yeah, which is a strategy for how to track versions of stuff. And then otherwise I'll say that Node, the programming language, has a really nice way of doing version management where you can just run a single command called npm version. And so basically what I've done is I've tied this to all of my stuff because it also like does git commits for you and stuff, so which we won't go into details on. But it does a lot for you. And so I've actually started using that in the root of all of my projects. And I use that to manage my.
Here's the question. So I, as a lay person who's laying down,
and you're just like, oh, this programming.
This programming is hurting my body.
I need to lay down.
What is version control?
That's what a layperson is, right? Somebody who's so overwhelmed by what they're learning that they have to lay down.
Laying down. Yeah.
Okay.
So what the hell?
So I used to think of
talking about.
I used to think of version control mostly as a backup and recovery mechanism, and like that was the only way that I thought about it, which has recently changed. But
so the idea being what? So if I'm working on a project,
the idea being if you're working on a project and let's say like 2 months go by and you're like working on some little detailed thing that's very very hard, And all of a sudden you're like, fuck, this was the wrong path. I should not have come down this path, right?
But you've changed a lot of things.
You've changed a lot of things all around this thing. And now you're like, well, I want to throw this away, but how do I get back to where I was 2 months ago?
Because you can't just control Z your way out of this hole.
Yeah, you're way too deep.
You would be
in the
holding
hole
down Control Z for a very
until
long
you
time.
died.
Yeah.
And so instead, you can use a version control system, which basically you can think of as basically taking snapshots of your progress,
Kind of like saving in a video game.
It's like saving, and you can have like a little message that you put along with the save, right? So it's just like having a stack of save points that you can go back to.
You can quick load
You can
after
quick load.
you've died.
Right. So
Like
now you're all this.
Half-Life.
So now you're like far down this path, and then you're like, "Fuck, I died," because you just made a bad decision, right? So now you can go backwards in time as far back into wherever you want to, and just recover the exact state of your code at that point in time. And then further, if you want to collaborate with somebody, now you can basically sort of branch off of your different parts. So now somebody can start going down one path, you go down another path,
So
and then
we
later
both-
on you merge those paths back
So
together.
we both load the same save,
Yeah.
but go do different adventures,
Right.
And then just put
And
the
then
saves back.
somehow
And now you merge your
magically
progress.
you bring them back.
Right.
Yeah.
And so a good version control system is all about basically tracking all of that stuff and then helping you merge things back together, or throw stuff away, or if say like a bunch of changes have been made and you discover at some point that there's a bug somewhere and you don't know where it was introduced, then usually there'll also be tools where it could be like, it can help you track stuff down by loading in a very clever way different saves between like the 2 points where like, you know, it worked here, you know, it doesn't work here. Where in the
narrow it
middle did it
down.
happen, right? And so there's like tooling to help you do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so a good version control system does all of that for you, and that's basically the only way that I use it until very recently when I started to use it also as a. So basically in that sense, the version control system represents the exact history of your project, like the people doing the work. What were they doing, right?
What were they
Yeah.
doing?
But there's another way to think about it, which is actually as a way to represent sort of deliverables and major changes that have happened that are done, right? That are considered conceptually complete, where you actually don't care if this history of snapshots even represents what really happened. In which case, you might like merge your stuff together and then just pretend like it was that way the whole time. Right. And so now you have this really clean path where instead of having all these branches and like all this different work and all these like little snapshots and saves, instead you like compress all that stuff down into one moment where
So
you're
you
like,
kind of
you're
trim
like,
the
here's-
branches to create a topiary. And
Exactly.
you're like, yep, this tree was always
This is
shaped
totally
like a
what
flamingo.
happened. Because the nice thing about that is now if you want to go say like now if you want to go back into a time to when like a feature did or did not exist.
So like the knee of the flamingo, for
Exactly.
example.
So now like you don't want to like look at like building the whole fucking patella and like attaching the muscles and
I
all this
don't
kind
care
of
about
stuff.
that.
You just want to be like, I want to go to the point where there was a knee. I
Yeah.
want to go to the knee point.
Give
You
me
just
the
go right
knee.
there.
You're like, I figured out all the details, and I'm pretty sure this knee is fine.
Yeah. Or if you
So-
just want to throw the knee away or just keep the knee. You don't have to like worry about its fucking parts, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Do
And
flamingos
so-
have knees? I
Do
don't
they?
know.
Right.
Their legs are so stick-like.
They're
It's
so
freaky.
long, there might not be a knee in
I
there.
don't know.
Yep.
We'll never know.
Yep. And so you can merge that way, and then you can. And so what I've moved to is, and a lot of what this year was about for me, talking about like improvements and stuff, was automating as many things as possible, but also making things as much as possible, making them so that I could not make mistakes anymore. So I've tied my version control system with my deployment and also with my documentation, so that those are all automatically connected together. So that if I say like I want to increment the version number, which is a different concept than the whole like taking snapshots and stuff, but I want to represent now this like moment in time.
So like, here's this knee.
Yeah, here's the knee. The knee exists now.
Version 0.5 knee.
Exactly. Codename
The knee patch.
The knee patch. Exactly.
Patch
So
on
that
the
if I
knee.
want to do that, at the moment that I make that thing happen, that also automatically deploys a build, automatically runs tests, automatically builds the documentation, and does all that stuff.
Your
right?
computer's like, yep, that's a knee.
Yep.
And then there's like, if you want to learn about knees, here's a book
Here's a
on
link.
knees that we just generated
Exactly,
based
yeah.
on this knee code.
Yep. And I also tested this knee to make sure it's flexible and doesn't bend the wrong way.
It's bendy, which of course it does bend the wrong way because it's a flamingo knee.
That's true. Well, bent the right way for a flamingo.
Yeah, okay, sure.
But yeah, so
Flamingos are full of shit.
Conspiracy.
that's,
Yeah.
I mean, most of them probably.
Yeah.
Like, all that fish they're eating.
That's true.
I learned that. No, never mind.
I learned that
Keep
something-
that one to
I learned
yourself.
that something horrible.
I don't know what's going on in your brain over there, but I don't want to hear it.
But yeah, so that's basically. So yeah, we throughout the studio we handle version management and control actually very differently from each other, even, and we're all kind of slowly coalescing on new ways of doing it, which mostly comes to our tooling.
Yes.
Because we now have an automated build pipeline for our Game Maker projects.
Thanks to Sure. That was his big project.
Yeah.
by the end of the year.
And so that thing then requires that we all, handle things a more specific way to make that work. But in that too, like, Game Maker, when you make a Game Maker project, it has version numbers inside of it. But those version numbers are just things that you enter in manually. So they're completely disconnected from what your code is and whatever. And so as part of that pipeline, I set it up so that it actually automatically changes the version number inside of the project to whatever the version number is inside of this whole Git node system, right? So that way it's always forced to be exactly the same, and a human user cannot make a mistake of fucking that thing up.
That's always the concern.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anytime you have a person doing something, you can never trust it.
Yeah.
No matter what it is.
No matter what, and no matter how good the person is. And people make this mistake of thinking that because they're an expert in something that they don't need rules or, they don't need a cheat sheet or a checklist or tooling to help them do it right because they're the expert.
Well, so I started doing this because I was just getting annoyed by how many times I would send a bunch of final art assets over to Seth through our various robots. And then he'd pull them down and be like, oh, like this one's got a box on it, or this one's off by a pixel, so I can't spin it, rotate it perfectly, all this sort of stuff. And so I was just like, I'm going to track this for a few weeks while I was making some of the final items for Levelhead. And it's going through, and I ended up having the first batch that I did, I had like a 22% error rate, which means that 1 out of every 5 assets, and I'd make a lot in a day.
Yeah.
Seth would get and be like, well, I can't do anything with this now.
It definitely was a frustration point in the process.
Because it is broken.
I would sit down and I'd be like, time to implement some art assets. And then I can't.
Because it's broken in some way.
Yeah.
And so what I did was just track this and then track the ways in which things were broken. And there's going to be your sort of one-off breaks where you just like, it was just something odd that happened.
It was a human fuck up.
Right. But then there's the process breaks, which is what you're talking about. Like I am an expert in Inkscape. I'm an expert in putting these freaking assets together. But the reality is when it comes to exporting, if I don't follow a checklist, which is what I do now, I basically built a checklist out of watching all these errors from this.
Yeah, you built it from your fuck ups. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, okay, so I need to center everything. All the bounding boxes need to be an odd number of pixels so that they have a central pixel, blah, 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 like all this things happen, check all these things. And it reduced my error rate to like 4% for the next batch of things, which was like one thing that I put out.
It doesn't matter how good you are at a thing when you're working with a complex system.
Things just
it's hard to remember.
Wrong.
Yeah, things just go wrong. And it was not even that's hard to remember. It's that memory is the thing where you retrieve some piece of information from your mind because of the context around you, right? It's not an automatic thing that always happens and is guaranteed to happen. And it's not the case that if you don't remember something at the moment you needed it, that it's even a faulty memory problem, right? It's that memory is a context triggered thing. And so it's not even about that.
Well, I mean, I even had the situation where I would have made the judgment that like, oh, I don't need to check this thing because I just finished this asset. So I just saw the whole thing through. It's good because I was here the whole time.
Oh yeah,
yep.
And then most of the time, those are the ones that had errors on them because I didn't go through like this.
And this was a big battle. So in the whole checklist concept as an important process management thing started with World War II airplanes, I think, with the Air Force as like an institutional wide checklist system being implemented. And it met a lot of resistance, but people kept crashing planes all the fucking time. And there was apparently one really big incident that was the catalyst for the whole thing, where there's this new giant fucking plane.
B-52, wasn't it?
I think so.
I think it was. I think it was a Boeing plane.
It was this huge plane, and it had this one different feature that had something to do with like the flaps being down or something like that. And the pilots had never experienced that new advanced feature before. And so they didn't really know how to engage with it, but they didn't really see anything in the cockpit for like what to do with it or whatever. And so then they just took off and the plane just crashed immediately, like within, just like went up and then went right back down again. And so then the Air Force did a big sort of investigation on this, and they came up with the idea of having a checklist. And so many people were pissed off about it.
It's happening with surgeons too, and hospitals generally doing the same thing, being able to drop even incidents of like hospital infections and stuff. You can drop them literally to 0 if everybody follows the checklist.
Because there are known causes for these things. And
it's like when you know your fuck ups, you make a checklist to cover for them.
Just don't do that.
Yeah, it was also like even they have in some places I know they have like materials that you're using for surgeries and stuff actually have like RFID chips in them.
Yeah.
And so that they can scan them when you take them out of the package to say like, I'm using this. And then there's like in your waste bin, there's a scanner that you have to scan it when you throw it back in so that you can then prove that like you took a thing out, did whatever the fuck with it, and then took it back out of the person.
Because people leave it, you leave stuff in people a lot during surgeries, a lot more than you would think would happen.
But it's basically because like if you have some like, gauze and stuff in there, once it gets covered in blood and stuff, it just looks like
you can't see
guts.
it. Yeah, you can't see it at all. Sponge. It's like it soaked up all the blood.
Yeah.
It's doing its spongy job.
It just looks like some gross viscera.
But now it's just a weird blood thing, which is that's what you look like inside anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just like a big weird blood hole.
As far as our methods, because he asked about agile, what are we?
We have such a small team that each of us has one siloed role.
Yeah.
And so the idea of implementing some kind of like Scrum or Agile or whatever.
We do stand up on Mondays where everyone's like, here's what I'm doing this week. And then,
but that's not really as part of a method. It's just like, so we all know what's happening.
Yeah. I think it's,
here's what I want to know. Because one thing that I'm pretty confident of is that software projects go beyond budget and beyond scope and beyond their timelines by like at least 50%, if not double or triple, just guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that nobody has really figured out how to do it.
Well, not perfectly.
I think most of these are
certainly
about team management.
Yeah, it's about team management.
It's about team management, not so much project management.
Well,
because you can't really predict. You can't predict what's going to go wrong or.
Well, it's not about that. It's not about like timelines and what's going to go wrong. It's about every week knowing like what are all the things that have to get done to move this project forward, right? Given that maybe you've got a dozen people working on it or whatever. In that case, you can't just say like, well, everybody work on whatever you want. Hopefully we make some progress,
Right.
But that requires somebody to, some subset of the team to sit down and say, here's all the moving pieces. Here's what we need to get done to move this.
So you need like a team lead.
Yeah. You need some hierarchy there. And so we're small enough because of the fact that basically one person is doing every project in the studio that it doesn't make sense to apply any of those kinds of methodologies to our own work.
At least not rigorously.
Not rigorously, right? We take aspects of any methodology that we've ever read about and we, whatever feels like it makes sense for what
I think we're loosely agile in terms of how.
So kind of
I would say as far as you
very
could describe,
bendy and
we're nimble,
doing a lot of yoga.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think as far as you could describe for a single person project, I think as far as you could use like the word agile, that's probably what we do.
Yeah,
probably.
Because each department is the smallest it can possibly be, which is one person or zero in a lot of cases.
Yep.
So, all right, last question of the year.
Woo!
Comes from Doombrowski, who says, "Word up, Butter Bros." Word. I've been working on a game off and on for about 2 years now. The full gameplay loop is playable, but there's still hardly any content in it. Should I go into early access or wait to release with what I feel is adequate content?
Is it fun?
Yeah, it depends.
Because if you need content for it to be fun, then fuck no.
Yeah. You should be thinking of early access as a release.
Yeah, it is a release.
Because you are charging people to play the game that you have made. You're delivering a product.
Yep.
Early access just means things are going to be changing a lot.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean I'm going to give you something that you're not going to enjoy.
Yeah. So that's basically the question is if, because you said the core loop is complete. So in other words, if the game is fully playable, if someone can hop in and just really sink their teeth into it, then early access might be a good thing. But it also depends on what you're trying to do. So if
you just want to have it out for some reason, then no.
Maybe hold on.
Early access is not a thing you should do just because you want to have your game out.
Yeah.
You need to have very clear reasons for doing it.
But if you think that like the involvement of the community could be good, either because of the size of your team, which is, one, or because of the aspects of the game that the community involvement would help to both get feedback to integrate it and also help actually build out the rest of the game in a way where they're necessarily giving you a better idea of where to put your time and energy into whatever that content is that you have sort of left over. Then that's again another. But it also depends on
replayability, right? Because if you're going into early access, you need a title that has an enormous amount of replayability because you need people to stick around while you make changes and have them test stuff out and have them looking forward to the changes that you're going to make. Because if you put something out that basically just a person can play through and now be done, why would they play it again 2 months later when you put out a big content patch, right?
Yeah.
So it depends what you mean by content.
Yeah. And by core gameplay loop.
And by core gameplay,
Yeah, because I would think also in Crashlands, the core gameplay loop was done in the first couple months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The core gameplay loop is go out, harvest resources, fight creatures, and then build stuff for the next tier.
So you could do it again.
So you were able to run through that loop, I believe, 2.5 times in the first couple months.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the loop exists, but it is completely worthless without the content to fill the loops out.
Right.
And so if you think about other games like maybe like Rogue Legacy or FTL or like any of these games that are built around rapid replay of the same content, those work super well in early access because people will play through the core loop, and the core loop by itself is great. It's fun. But the idea of the game is to keep replaying it. And so when you add new content, people get to replay the content, right? So if you think about like if we had been doing Crashlands in early access, if we added several tiers of stuff for you to build, but then also fixed some problems in the earlier tiers, well, people have already passed those.
Right.
So now they don't really get to experience it.
Well, I think again the whole point is that if you're willing to let the community direction and also that pressure to have this sort of constant play aspect sort of maybe redefine or sort of shift your vision a little bit, then I think to, potentially go for it. But in the case of something like Crashlands, you can see, Don't Starve was like one of the first early access big successes. And you could see
and it's all about replay.
It's all about replay. And so I think if you look at something like Crashlands, if we had put it into early access, probably the pressure would have actually been to build more of a sort of a roguelike system into that game because that's how people
otherwise people wouldn't
Actually,
play
the way I think about it is early access is for system games, not content games.
Yeah.
So
if you're just
Fortnite,
missing content, then that's probably not going to work.
and
Well, it depends on what kind of game
it
it is.
is. Yeah. Because Fortnite, that's early access.
Mhm.
Minecraft was in early access for like 6 years.
Yep.
Kerbal Space Program just came out early access like a year ago.
Mhm.
RimWorld early access, right? So these are all games that are purely built around the systems of the game and how they interact. And then whenever you add a content patch or like a big update to the game in early access, then that has both a forward and backward cascading effect where like you get a new rocket part in Kerbal Space Program and somebody who maybe like they did everything they wanted to do in the game, they're going to see that a new patch came down and like, oh shit. Oh, I'm going to replay the whole fucking thing, but with this new kind of rocket or whatever.
Or they can continue where they left off with that new kind of rocket.
Exactly. Yeah. And they can now expand their goals or do new things. And I think in Kerbal Space Program, they kept adding new planetary bodies and stuff to go to. So as they added new toys for people to play with, then they would also give people new goals to try to use those for. So even people who had felt like they had done everything would now have even more stuff to do.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the most fundamental question to ask yourself, which is your game a systems game or more of a content game?
Right. Yeah. So is it Firewatch, which is pure content, just about? That's not going to work in early access, And I think there's some games that kind of I feel like defy this a little bit. That still do pretty well. So like I played Slime Rancher,
right,
which is very much in that midpoint, like a Crashlands, which is you go out in the world, you collect a bunch of materials, you come back, and then you like build up your farm and stuff, and then that lets you go out and get bigger, better.
Slime Rancher worked though because I also played it when it came into early access, and they had easily 6 hours of content. Right?
Exactly.
And really polished, very satisfying, very fun content.
Yeah.
So that it felt like an entire short game.
Yep.
Like a really well-made entire short game.
So yes,
I got to the end of it and it kind of trickled off at the end. And I was like, okay, I can see how they're going to add just a fuck ton more stuff here. But I also never came back to play that game.
Me neither. Yeah. I played through several hours, ran out of stuff. I haven't touched it since. Because then I thought, well, I enjoyed it, but I also don't want to have that experience again where I play for another couple hours and then all of a sudden I'm out of stuff again. And so, because then I feel also like I'm probably ruining the game for myself for when they do finally put it into 1.0.
It is now in 1.0, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Then maybe I'll pick it up again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's hard to build a community around that because of course people pick it up, they engage with it and like, oh, I guess I'm done now. And
I think it's probably the secondary question to ask, which is the game itself robust enough that a community can form around it?
Yeah.
Because I think if you have those two pieces where it's a more systems heavy game and it's robust enough that people could gather around it like a campfire sort of a thing and share stories about it or just sort of
help each other figure out how to do stuff and
then
uncover new ways of doing things.
Exactly. Then I think it might be ready for early access. Because I think those to me are the two like really critical pieces. And the level of polish can vary. I mean, we've seen plenty of early access games that have done really well. RimWorld, for example, that are hideous in almost every respect.
Though the gameplay is very polished.
It is.
Yeah.
They put their focus where it mattered for early access.
Well, that's the thing is, I don't think that that's generally true. I think because in general, you can't sell a game. You can't sell a game because the gameplay is good.
Right.
Correct. You can only sell a game because it looks good. Like, I mean, I think the reason that RimWorld hasn't been even more successful is because it looks like a bad game when you just look at the
but also
the
weirdly, because their graphics are so bad, their graphics are also able to be very lightweight.
Yeah.
Which allows them to do some really crazy shit because they have a lot of system resources left over to do a lot of stuff with the simulation. So it's kind of the graphics are bad, but kind of like as a benefit to the game.
Yeah.
Not in terms of being able to sell it, but in terms of being able to.
Well, it is the case that because the game looked so bad, but then was so successful and highly reviewed. Yeah, that was that combination was the reason that I bought it. Right?
Yeah, I'd been hearing about it for a long time, but every time I looked at it, I kind of threw it in my mouth. And then I was like,
but way before that, before it was successful, people had to make it successful, right? And so it is not an easy thing to do to make that happen. To have a game that doesn't look good and get people in the door. To then start to prove to other people via social proof.
Because you gotta understand the context of the market now.
Yeah.
Which is that there are so fucking many games now. And even when RimWorld came out, was that 3 years ago or longer?
A while ago, yeah. It was last year, 2 years ago.
I don't know.
It was a very different time.
Yeah.
And it's always like every year is a very different time. And it's reaching that point where players' distrust in early access goes up over time as they have potentially bad experiences or get burned by developers or whatever. So you have that to contend with. And then there's just the general competition, which is like, why would somebody gamble on your half finished game when they've got 10,000 games on their wish list that are done and look great and are on sale and everything else, right?
So maybe there's the third question, which is,
are
you able to articulate the hook of your game well enough that people would buy it over something else?
Yeah. What's the unique
Which is still the question for even a launch. Because I think the first question you got to ask yourself
the thing is
why are you going into early access?
Yeah, the early access things they're the same questions you ask actually before going to launch too.
Yeah, well, it's not quite the same. Because for early access, like the question is, what is it you're trying to accomplish? Because
why should you release it before it's technically
why should you release it before it's done? And I think the only really valid answer is because you think that doing that is going to improve your
quality
launch
of the game
and improve the quality of the game, right? But not even just improve the quality of the game, because if you improve the quality of the game, but you can't make a better launch because of improving its quality, then who cares, right? So I think the only reason to go into early access is because you truly believe, for whatever reason, that doing that is going to increase the size of your launch. And the only way that can make sense is if you're going to be building a community. And so that means you would only launch into early access if you think your early access could be successful and that it could build you an audience over some period of time. And of course, if it does, that means that now you have to manage the audience as well, right? So there's
the community.
It's not just another launch you get to have. Yes, it's not just like you get one launch, then you get another launch. Great, you
got 2 launches. Congratulations.
Yeah. It's not like that at all. So I think the first question to ask yourself is, why are you doing this? And then once you know that answer, do you think this is sufficient? Do you think it can work?
Maybe that's another one. 20Y teen. Why are you doing this?
20Y teen.
Okay, well I think that's a good place to cap it off for the year.
Yep.
So that's all the time we got. We'd like to thank our producer Fat Bard for making us sound good. Thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. If you'd like to get more involved in the Butterscotch community, we have a Discord server at discord.gg/bscotch. It's very hopping these days. So get your keister on in there. Say hello. That's right. I said keister. Yeah. I think that's like a country.
I don't even know where that comes from.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard it in very many contexts. Also, if you'd like to cover your body with Butterscotch merch, to kick off the new year, just looking fucking awesome. We've got some t-shirts and stuff over at shop.bscotch.net. Also, if you'd like to send us something, we have a mailbox, which you can find the address for over at mailbox.bscotch.net. If you'd like to buy us a cup of coffee and keep our podcast juices flowing, you can do so over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next year.
Goodbye.
Bye.